to concurrent viewers. I suppose you already know what I'm going to say, but if you've been following me on Twitter, you would know that I think I'm building up a better case for it. Obviously, things have to get much worse for people to be frightened enough into changing their ways. I think people who have known me for a few years now would know that whatever they think of my sanity, that I do believe that my solution is the best solution available, particularly when there is no one else who is even close to proposing a solution. So the people with bigger channels, they do their usual thing of complaining about the symptom while I propose a solution. And why am I not more successful? And it's only because I am not being assisted by people who ought to feel it to be in their interests to assist me. Because if you are a political commentator, you would feel compelled, duty bound to comment on what others claim to be the solution. And if you can't bring yourself to talk about it, then that means there's something wrong. If you can't talk about secular Koranism because you're afraid of losing your super chats and super stickers and whatever it is that is tied up with your source of income, then you are not really doing what you are supposed to be doing in your role as political commentator, and this means that you are morally compromised and therefore not to be trusted. So how is secular Koranism with Ukrainian characteristics the answer? Of course it is the answer, because if the whole world adopted secular Koranism, I know we are not very close to that, but just supposing if everyone thought that, well, so many things are going wrong in the world, and obviously the principles regulating our behavior as individuals towards each other, to our countrymen, are not good enough, and this, by extension, includes international behavior and encompasses international relations, which is to do with foreign policy, which is also to do with war. And I'm afraid, having looked at Christianity, it's become even clearer that the whole thing is broken down. I don't think it would be good for white people if they are, again, the people who are found to be starting another world war. And it looks very likely that if there is a world war, it's going to be on record in the history books that it was started yet again by white Christian people. I fear for them because their reputations will clearly be marred, and they will be completely ruined as a civilization, and their reputation as civilized people will be, well, forever destroyed. I see Jay Walker is saying that secular Koranism can create world peace, which is very nice of him considering he was one of my harshest critics. But it is possible that he will change his mind in the next 5 minutes, and then it won't matter because it will cancel what he just said out, and I wasn't expecting him to say such a thing anyway. But that is the difference, I think, between somebody saying something and then saying, oh, I was only joking, my dear. I never intended you to take it seriously. And this is what drives so many people mad that our laws are being treated in this way, almost as if our political leaders are saying, I was only joking about COVID and lockdown. You don't have to worry about that now because we don't care if you all die of it, and you can throw off your masks and nobody's going to fine you and nobody's going to make a fuss now. And the media will just say, well, let's forget about it and start getting excited about the Russians and the Third World War. Who knows what is going to happen next? And that is why it is necessary for our laws to be bound by a moral system that is supposed to reflect the eternal and universal laws for humanity that an eternal and universal deity was supposed to have created. Now, whether you believe in God or not, I think you would agree with me that it is better that laws weren't changed every few days. It is a good thing if our laws were not changed as often as our political leaders might change their underwear. And the only reason why everything is going wrong is because our laws are being changed at the whims of our political classes, and they can't really justify it. So that's why they keep forgetting about it and introducing new laws and getting excited about something else. They are the ones suffering from ADHD, and they need to calm down. But what would calm them down? Obviously, the only thing that would calm them down is a loud enough voice and a powerful enough presence to make them pay attention. But I'm afraid I haven't been fortunate in attracting the attention of channels bigger than mine whose men are afraid of discussing secular Koranism because they are terrified of what their subscribers and viewers would say if they were to even entertain on their channel the conceiver of secular Koranism. So what I'm saying is that Western men are collectively too frightened to do the right thing. They do not have the conviction of what they are supposed to believe in, and I'm afraid they do not believe in anything much. And that is indeed the problem. Why don't they believe in anything much? It's because they don't sacrifice anything for it. They never say anything clearly for long enough for people to say, aha, I now know what it is you believe in because you have been saying the same thing so clearly for so long. Are there men like this in the West, other than those who persist in blaming the Jews and hating Muslims? And that is not a particularly constructive way to base your moral system on if you want to base it on hatred of particular groups who have the thing that you lack, which is the dignifying and protective wrapper of religion. And so the danger is that the only thing that binds Western men to each other is their, quote, whiteness, unquote, and not much else. So they can recognize each other as white, but they would like to also recognize each other as haters of Jews and haters of Muslims and haters of other races. And they can't quite see that this in itself does not amount to a moral system. And in fact, what did amount to a moral system, their Christianity did not serve them very well, because when Europe was monoracial and uniformly Christian, that did not stop white people in Europe from fighting terrible wars with each other and then going from the old world to the new world and fighting another terrible war with each other, the most important of which was the American Civil War, followed by the Spanish-American War, when the Americans kicked out the Spanish from the Americas. And so things went well for the Americans for a bit, until now, when things are not going so well. They started a war and they can't quite finish it, and they don't quite dare send any more American men to die for another neocon war. The political classes don't quite dare, so they ask Ukrainians to continue to defy the Russians in order to hurt the Russians. And the Russians are being smarter than that by not immediately killing anybody, merely surrounding them in cauldrons and waiting for them to make up their minds about what they should be doing now that they are finally aware that America and Europe are not coming to the rescue of the Ukrainians. The most that they will do is send them helmets or guns, and that's about it. These degenerate Americans and Europeans will not be risking the lives of any European or American and so this is the situation, the humiliation of the West. They could prolong the economic war, but only at their own expense. If they prolong it, their citizens will suffer in the form of rising prices, food prices as well as energy prices, and these are basics, and they will hurt people at the bottom of the economic ladder. And when enough people hurt, they will think of overthrowing the government that they will blame for it, for their current predicament. And this was what really happened in the French Revolution and the Russian Revolution. And it was, yes, the Russian performance in the Great War. So basically, after the Kronstadt mutiny, the Russians had to pull out because they knew they couldn't continue fighting a war that had already suffered a mutiny. And we already know that there isn't a European army. We also know that men in European nations would have no desire at all to fight for Ukraine. And if they were asked to do so by their stupid national leaders, they would soon be told where to go. And the Americans also know that, because the American government would know that because the Americans are already tired of their neocon wars, they would not be sending any more white American soldiers to die in another pointless neocon war. So really, what the Americans had done, thinking Russia would back down, was bank on the Russians backing down, and Putin didn't back down. He doubled down and he took focused political as well as military action, and he will have basically given the Americans and the Europeans two black eyes. So what is to be done now? Westerners already hate their leaders, and their leaders are not being well led. If they are being led by anyone at all, they are flailing around like hysterical women who don't know what they are doing other than screaming and shouting and saying, kill, kill, kill. It probably won't be much longer now before this hysterical woman falls to the ground in a faint. And what will happen then? I see all the usual suspects are in the chat. Thank you, Jay. He's saying the right thing. I don't know how long he will continue to say it, but I suppose for the moment I'm grateful that he will say that he can think of no better solution than secular Koranism, and he would be right and nobody would disagree with him. They may not like what I prescribe, and what I prescribe is what the doctor might prescribe for a patient whose leg has turned black from gangrene. We cannot expect this patient to like the invasive surgical procedure of amputation. But it is the only way of saving his life. After all, we are in uncharted territory and stormy waters. Nothing of this kind has ever happened before to such a degree, to such an unprepared Western world, where really no moral system is being followed. And those of you who have followed me on Twitter will know I've done a string of tweets, which I guess could be a draft of an essay. But I think it makes the points clearly enough that if we see this crisis of confidence in the government as an opportunity for turning over a new leaf and a time for, well, timely change, things might yet improve. Because really, the problem is that people and politicians do not submit to truth, logic, and morality. And I'm just going to go and put on a jumper. Hold on a minute. No, I've forgotten what I was saying. But it's something to do with secular Koranism, isn't it? It's about, yes, crisis and opportunity, I think I was talking about. So the opportunity would be to, well, if our boiler is broken, then it's an opportunity to get a new and better one. And why is our boiler broken? Because it's not fit for purpose. It's not fit for the purpose of our times and of our yes, it's not fit for our time because our societies have developed beyond a kingdom. So we know that there was a time when Europe was peopled by little kingdoms, and this was the same in other countries. That there would be, all these little kingdoms with their kings and their absolute monarchs who would need some kind of moral system to support their divine right to rule. It's not a new idea, obviously, the divine right to rule, because we know that the Japanese emperor was considered to be actually divine, and we know that the Romans deified their emperors after they died. So an element of divinity always crept in. And I suppose it was necessary for rulers to make their subjects think there's something special to them. Otherwise, they would think, well, you're just a mortal man. Perhaps we'll kill you, perhaps we'll disagree with you, perhaps we'll think you're, well, mortal and fallible and not obey you. And that, I suppose, was the problem of retaining power. But let us think of when the concept of monarchy was first introduced, and it was actually in the Old Testament. We know from the book of Judges that before the Jews had kings, they basically lived in a theocracy administered by judges who applied the law. I don't know if they think it was the golden age, but it must give them pause for thought because they didn't really have much luck with their kings, did they? So if you think about all these monarchs of Israel, there was David, and before him there was Saul, and I forget the others, but anyway, Solomon was supposed to be, well, their best, their most magnificent king. But unfortunately, after Solomon died, his son was no good and split the kingdom in two, and terrible. And then I think the northern kingdom fell into idolatry, and the Assyrians invaded and took them all away as prisoners and slaves. So there were more kings afterwards, but they were no good, and they were puppets of the Romans, and then they couldn't bear the Romans, and they rebelled against the Romans, and the Romans hated them and wanted to punish them. And there is a theory that the New Testament was actually the work of the Roman propaganda department to co-opt their God and mix it up with a meek and crucified Christ, which the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great eventually adopted that religion 300 years or so after the death of Jesus. So Christianity has an interesting history. And if we do not consider the political background of its development, we are certainly not getting the whole picture. There have been other religions, of course, to give, say, Emperor Hirohito, the previous, the pre-World War II emperors of Japan, the divine right to rule. So it wasn't just Christianity that did that. There were other, obviously the Japanese would be going for Shinto or whatever they do. I haven't really studied that. And of course the Egyptians would have some other story. They have a pantheon of deities, do they not? But really, we have to go beyond these ideas because, well, humanity forms itself into ever more complex societies, requiring more nuanced instruments of government. In China, there was the idea of the mandate of heaven. So it might be one of the reasons why Chinese civilization has been greater than that of Japanese civilization, because they never pretended that their emperor was divine, because that would be a form of idolatry, right? So whatever you think of the Chinese, they in their own way try to avoid idolatry. Well, the Japanese didn't, you see. We live in something analogous to a film, a movie, and we will not really be able to, we miss the beginning and we will certainly miss the end. And all we can do is try and understand how we came to be how we are through understanding the past, and perhaps if we are wise, we can predict the future. So with regard to the Chinese, they tried as much as they could to avoid idolatry, and this they did by rejecting the idea of a divine emperor. And they managed to do this with the idea of the mandate of heaven, which is the belief that every emperor begins his reign with the mandate of heaven, which may or may not be withdrawn, depending on how well he governed his empire. This may be simple enough, but it is one of these simple but flexible ideas that you might say is a truism, but it serves its purpose. So the idea is that every emperor begins his reign with the mandate of heaven, which may be withdrawn, and the signs of its withdrawal will be pestilence, invasion, rebellion, and natural disaster. And what it will mean that the emperor has governed badly and deserves to be removed and replaced by hopefully a better emperor. And this was how the Chinese thought of the natural order of things. But last century, the natural order of emperors came and went when the last dynasty of China fell, the Qing dynasty. I suppose there was just no one else to replace it because it didn't it didn't end because it was being invaded by a foreign power such as, the Mongol invasion. Now, I know the Japanese tried, but they couldn't really hope to. Well, they didn't manage to win the Second World War, so that was the end of them. So in terms of how the Qing dynasty came to an end, it was, I suppose, a little like what the West is now coming up to. I forget how many thousands of years. How many years did China have all these dynasties? I think it might have been 3,000. I'll check for you. But yes, I mean, it did something analogous to 2,000 years of Christianity. I think it's about 3,000, but I'll look it up for you. Dynasties in Chinese history. Wikipedia is so useful. So I just need to look up the first one, and then we can get an idea of how many dynasties in Chinese history. Or Chinese dynasties were hereditary monarchical regimes that ruled over China during much of its history. From the inauguration of dynastic rule by Yu the Great in around 2070 BC to the abdication of the Guangdong Empire in 1912 in the wake of the Xinhai Revolution, China was ruled by a series of successive dynasties. So, yeah, it would be about 4,000 years, right? Yeah, it'd be about 4,000 years. So I guess for the Chinese, it was, a bit scarier because there's sort of more dynasties in this time period, 2070 BC to 1912 AD. So I suppose it's arguably a bigger event for them, and more of a shock because it was more a longer period of rulership under this system was being done away with. And actually the West is in a better position to effect the transition from one kind of political system into another because its infrastructure is still intact, the internet, and it's still all right. We just need the directing intelligence of a leader, and unfortunately we don't have that. And obviously, I'm saying we should give up representative democracy for a one-party theocracy. Unfortunately, I can't find a Western man with a channel bigger than mine prepared to discuss this with me because they are too terrified of upsetting their subscribers and viewers who might withhold their super stickers and super chats. So it's really little difficulty that I foresee, but in theory they could, just flick a switch and be for once courageous and principled and do the right thing for once in their lives. And once the idea of secular Koranism becomes more generally known amongst nationalists, then things might start to get better. The truth is that however much you detest my solution, you really have nothing better. And it is as well to acknowledge your lack of a better alternative than to continue to thwart and obstruct me and or doing nothing constructive for yourself. So the best thing you could do, even if you don't like secular Koranism, is to, ask the YouTubers you trust. Obviously, you don't trust me because, Joe obviously prefers Thomas Barton Reese to me and, whoever he listens to. But I think I'm better than all of them. I'm having a little bit of difficulty with Felix Rex, aka Black Pigeon Speaks, who is currently in Japan, and he won't quite engage with me because I assume he fears his anti-Semitic and Islamophobic subscribers and viewers, and I know what it's like for him because I am in his Telegram group and I do see the racism, the anti-Semitism and the Islamophobia of his Telegram group. But I hope he will take courage, because obviously if he allows me to explain what I would like to explain, which is to do with the history of the West. Obviously he can contradict me and disagree with me and challenge me, and I don't mind, and I can have an honest and rational discussion, and I'm used to being contradicted. I won't have a meltdown and rage quit on him, even if he were to have, a whole panel of alt-right YouTubers who detest secular Koranism. I would be prepared to deal with all of them at the same time, on the same channel and the same stream. So if he doesn't feel equal to dealing with me on his own, he's free to invite all the others to hold his hand and, whatever, to give him courage to have me on. I think it would be the best way of propagating the power and glory of secular Koranism, particularly in view of the fact that no one else has come close to a solution as clear and comprehensive as mine, and also so easy to explain, capable of engaging the interest of, non-nationalists in the form of, Christians whose religion has failed and has been failing for the past 500 years since the beginning of the Reformation, and they know, as I have been telling them, that Christianity is a religion incapable of reformation because it has the basic problem of being a religion of compulsory idolatry and blasphemy, and this would be seen as a problem if you believe in the Abrahamic God, whom we all know, even if we do not accept the possibility of his existence. We must have, we have to accept that the Abrahamic God did indeed forbid idolatry and blasphemy, and Christianity offends against these prohibitions. So in one fell swoop, we could have the opportunity of making clear to our national leaders as well as to the national leader in America and possibly the national leader in Russia, because he's also, well, culturally Christian, isn't he? The Russians are Orthodox Christians, and there is a problem with Christianity, and Islam is an imperial religion that guarantees freedom of belief. And it is this guarantee and all the other things, other principles that come with the Quran that make for peaceful coexistence of all the different groups in your empire, if that is what you have. And if you don't have an empire, you will also have different groups that would have conflicting interests with each other, such as the rich and the poor, and the young and the old, and the male and the female, and the majority and the minority. So the Quran has rules that would be considered fair enough by all these groups with conflicting interests. And it is only under Christianity that everything keeps exploding into world wars. So I think that in our own interests, we should put it to people above us, public intellectuals, people with greater knowledge and greater seniority in terms of moral and intellectual authority. We should be asking them what they think of secular Koranism. I've done my best. I've tried to attract the attention of Felix Rex, aka Black Pigeon Speaks, but no luck. I have to accept the fundamental neurosis of Western man, that he is incapable of acting in his own interests, speaking the truth as he sees it, or even if he does accidentally speak the truth in error, he will be apologizing for it 3 days later. I really think that I am actually the most coherent and consistent person in the circles that I move in. And that would be, well, the alt-right, sir. The alt-right. I call them the alt-right simply because it's a descriptive term for those who don't believe that mainstream conservatism is able to solve the problems created by liberalism. And so I appeal to all of you to do what you think is morally right, which is I'm not even asking you to agree with me. I'm just asking you to get people with bigger channels to allow me their platform, so I can explain how secular Koranism would operate and why it is better than what we have now. You don't need to agree with me to do this, do you? And, if you're not sure of your own judgment and you prefer the judgment of people like Felix Rex, aka Black Pigeon Speaks, then you should be asking him to expedite this discussion that he said we are supposed to be having. I will read the chat now. Yes, of course I have to be on the channels of alt-right YouTubers with bigger channels than me, obviously. I mean, what do you expect? It's been clear for quite a few years now what it is that I want. Why do you find that strange or surprising? You must have known that this was what I've been asking for years. Thank you, Singh, for saying that you perceive secular Koranism as a movement of peace. It is indeed the third position of the 21st century. Obviously, I can't do it without your help, and the least you can do is, well, get in touch with Felix Rex, who is on Twitter, to tell him to hurry up and have me on his channel. Yes, Tom Anderson, you are exactly right that the solution to the Ukraine is secular Koranism. Evelyn, for you, I have not asked God to take any side. I don't think I've even referred to him. You're very good at sloganeering, aren't you, Runes Singh, who says secular Koranism will rise on the ashes of the blind, the deaf, and the dumb. Oh, that's quite good. I don't know why Joe is asking me if secular Koranism will set fire to the disabled. I don't know where you get your crazy ideas from, you hysterical man. I mean, secular Koranism would not. I suppose there's some idea of it rising from the ashes like a phoenix, but it hasn't been tried. So something that hasn't been tried can't be said to have failed or died, is what I'm trying to say. I mean, obviously, the reason why I call it secular Koranism is to distance my interpretation from the interpretation of Muslims whose interpretation has not exactly served them well. Evelyn, for you asked if Muslims keep house pets. I think cats are quite popular with Muslims in Malaysia. Well, actually, I mean, there've been a few unflattering mentions of dogs in in the Quran, but it's all about them. It's like it doesn't matter what you say to the dog; it doesn't get what you're saying. And I think, well, that's fair enough. We can't expect dogs to get God. But it doesn't say anything like you can't keep a pet because you're Muslim. So Joe only listens to Thomas Barton Rees for his comedic value. But I know you take me rather more seriously because that's why you get so hysterical in your accusations and lies and distortions of what you think my message is. do you think Thomas Barton Rees will invite me on? Well, we've had a bit of a ropey relationship, so, well, if he invites me, I'll go on, but, he can't bear being contradicted or criticized. He's autistic like that, and the thing is, you kind of see what he's trying to do. It's like, don't mind me, I'm neurotic, and I'm not going to be, any big leader of any big movement. I'm just going to be, a big YouTuber because I skirt over topics superficially. I never really talk about anything properly because I get upset when people contradict me. But please, YouTube, let me have my big channel. So, because I won't do anything crazy. That would, well, I think he's saying I would never do anything that would work because I'm a flake. So let me have my big channel and don't mind me with my crazy conspiracy theories and never discussing anything properly because I get triggered when people disagree with me. So that is basically Thomas Barton Rees's shtick. He doesn't want to be taken seriously. That's why he keeps going on about conspiracy theories. But I want to be taken seriously. Yes, you're right. I need to declare Christianity kaput in order that it step aside for secular Koranism, right? Obviously, I have to do that. If your boiler is irreparably broken, you can't just leave it broken and useless in your home. You need to take it out with the trash, right? And I know it's going to be hard to get the owner to shift it, and they'll be saying things like, "Oh, I know it's not giving us any heating or any hot water. We know that, but it has sentimental value, and it's like an heirloom to us, and all that kind of thing." And I basically have to, well, persuade them to give it up. So yeah, that's why I have to go on about idolatry and blasphemy and call them out for their hypocrisy and their cowardice. So if they really believe in God, right? So this is my reasoning. If they really believe in God, then it's not just any God, it would be the Abrahamic God, then they would have to accept that the Abrahamic God did indeed forbid idolatry and blasphemy, and Christians have been worshipping idolatrously and blasphemously for 2,000 years. So they've got to stop, right? If they really believe in God, and if they don't believe in God, then they still have to accept secular Koranism because we already know that Islamophobes, who are mostly atheists anyway, won't be able to agree on a better guide for humanity than the Quran. So it's like I've won all the arguments. And okay, think of Islamophobes as consisting of Jews and Gentiles. So, okay, there are these Jews who don't like secular Koranism. And you have Gentiles who don't like secular Koranism because, well, they be Christian or they be atheists, right? So there's only two other possibilities. So the Christians would just say, we want the same old crap because we haven't given up on the idea of worshipping Jesus as God. Okay, so, well, they can be dismissed because we already know that Christianity is a minority pursuit in the West, and it's a religion even more despised than Islam. So we've only got the atheists to deal with, and what they're going to say, they're going to say, we want liberalism, or we want Nazism, or we want communism, or fascism, and okay, then there'll be four lots, and they won't be able to agree. So I literally have won all the arguments. And perhaps that's why, Felix Rex, Black Pigeon Speaks, won't have me on, because he knows that to have me on his channel would mean being the first YouTuber to formally launch Secular Koranism, and I guess he's not ready for it. But I don't mind. I mean, if he's too scared to have me on, he can, discuss it quietly with his, with other alt-right YouTubers. It's all right. I mean, if I'm too scary, then I'll give them time to slowly get used to the idea. And then, after conferring, and they might let me on. After agreeing with each other how to treat me and what questions to ask me, or, whatever it is that they want to do, the lost boys of nationalism, conferring with each other about how to deal with me. Thank you to Freak for saying you're surprised at Felix Rex, aka Black Pigeon Speaks, won't have me on. He actually said he'd have me on, but I haven't heard anything from him. So I don't know. I don't know what he's doing. Is he busy boiling his head? Is he still thinking about it? Or is he just, hoping to fob me off by pretending he's going to have me on, but never having me on? I don't know. But I've been in his Telegram group complaining, and I guess I haven't been exactly polite, and and then you'll probably use that as an excuse. Oh, she was rude to me, so I'm not going to have her on after all, which is exactly the excuse that Ed Dutton was using. It's like, yeah, I know that they have a boys' network, and I'm not one of the boys. So maybe they're busy conferring about what line to take with me, and I don't know. I can only speculate, can't I? What do you mean about the rules in the Quran not being clearly defined? They're certainly more clearly defined than the New Testament, right? Do I brag about my sex life? I don't remember doing such a vulgar thing. Perish the thought. I honestly, I don't think I bragged about my sex life. But I do rather brag about Joe being in love with me, as Thomas Barden Rees has pointed out when he keeps going on about me in the chat of Thomas Barden Rees. It's very flattering, but it wouldn't be quite right to say that Joe and I are having sex, or that we have any kind of a sex life together. I'm sure Joe does fantasize, but without my knowledge or encouragement. Evelyn, for you, asked an interesting question. he says, I have a hard time understanding how God can talk to people, yet somehow Jesus has no purpose. I'll try and work out what you're trying to say. So basically, are you asking me why God has allowed Christianity to flourish for 2,000 years? Is that really your question? Because that's a question I'm going to answer, because otherwise your comment makes no sense. So why did he do it? And my answer is, of course, that it's a practical joke. It's a way of giving people the rope that they need to hang themselves on. It's like, I've told you not to do your idolatry and blasphemy, and obviously I'm going to be testing you and giving you opportunities for idolatry and blasphemy and and for 2,000 years, you people didn't get it, that Christianity is idolatry and blasphemy. And now you've got Claire telling you that Christianity is idolatry and blasphemy, and you still won't get it. Because you are, as Joe is, indulging in the deadly sin of pride and envy and anger. Am I being contradictory in saying Christianity is kaput? What am I contradicting? I'm saying it obviously has a purpose. I mean, are you saying that God didn't intend for it to be kaput? I'm saying he would allow it to exist, to test the ability of people to spot the error, like a trick question. So I don't see what the problem is, effluent, for you. So basically, God, if he exists, says, don't do those things, and then he gives you these things as temptations to test your ability to resist temptation, and then he would, I suppose, send somebody to say, look, you have been practicing idolatry and blasphemy, and you should stop. And then he's testing you, in your ability to listen to good advice when you come across it. What's the problem? It still makes sense to me. Oh, you are flattering me today. Thank you, freak. I'm afraid I don't really know the answer to the question of how many times in the gospel did people worship the Lord Jesus Christ. How many times did he rebuke them? I don't know. Joe says she insults people and expects to be let on their channels to spread her foul ideas. Well, I do. I always ask nicely from the beginning. I do ask nicely, and then when being nice doesn't work, obviously I have to become more insistent. I can't just give up, can I? When the whole of the West is at stake, I can't just give up. Obviously, I have to try a little bit harder on your behalves to save the West. So I don't think it's particularly weird to begin by asking nicely, and then when being nice doesn't work, I have to up the ante, don't I? Do you really expect me to just give up and walk away when so much is at stake? Joe is really so very silly. Yeah, so I've explained why God allowed Christianity to flourish and for there to be three global empires that are Christian. And actually, there's a point to it all, because one of the advantages of empire is that you have good communications and transport. Because that was the whole point of the Roman Empire and also the British Empire. The British built railways all over India. The Romans built their straight roads. And so if you lived in the Roman or the British Empire, you would enjoy better transportation and communications than previously. Do you see? And therefore, even in a collapsing empire, the network of transport and communications would still exist. And this would facilitate the propagation of ideas. So I think there is a divine plan, arguably, behind all this Christianity business. And it's already pretty much true that um, Christians are a warlike people because they don't really have any principles. They pretend to, and they they claim to believe in Jesus being God, but they don't really. They do it for the sake of, well, not being cancelled by other Christians, not being burnt at the stake. Um, they did have the rule of law when they practiced marriage, and then you know they didn't for the past 50 years. So there has been a moral collapse, and you can't revive Christianity again to to get back what you had, because the toothpaste is out of the tube, the cat is out of the bag. People are not just going to submit to being forced to go into church. And you don't have the personnel and the energy to make them do that. All you can do is make them follow the laws that won't make them degenerate, or deepen their degeneracy. And the most important of that would be to treat unmarried parents as sex offenders. And I'm afraid I suspect Joe to be an unmarried parent, and that's why he's so hysterical against me, and making up all kinds of lies, because he can't bear the thought that he might be lashed 100 times for, well, per illegitimate offspring. And I suppose it's, well, frightened and fearful and full of hatred, and I suppose I can reassure him that there will be no retrospective legislation. He won't be punished retroactively. for having sired however many bastards as that he did, because I know it's not considered an offence in Britain or the West at the moment, but when secular Koranism is established, it will be. But fear not, there will be a period of grace when you can still So it'll be, well, a lot of fun and entertainment. I see that as, game shows on TV, and it'll be fun. So don't worry about it. You'll be really pleased when it is finally adopted, and you will be, I'm sure, its biggest champions. Well, once you know it's safe for you to support it. I know a few of you have been complaining that I'm not rich and famous and powerful enough to make it safe for you to support secular Koranism, but that isn't the point. You need to be able to support it because you think it would work, rather than because you think there will be a reward tomorrow if you support it. You need to, well, be able to risk something, at least your reputation, in supporting it. So obviously Christianity has changed the world, because if you have three global Christian empires, you will have this sort of global transportation and communications network that will make it really easy to spread secular Koranism all over the world. So, Joe, are you calling yourself a harmless nutter? Well, I suppose you are. It's good of you to admit that. Evelyn, for you, why do you say that you don't understand how any religion escapes idolatry? I mean, obviously, there are only two religions acceptable to God, and that must be the religions attached to the Torah and the Quran. So, and all the others are, well, not kosher or not halal. Oh, it seems that Joe thinks that I might be fond of him when he fantasizes about me. Well, obviously, I'm, most of my friends in the West are white. Okay, the overwhelming majority of the people I know in the West are white. So, you shouldn't really believe the hysterical lies of Joe saying that I hate white people and I hate white men and I hate white women. Because if I did, I wouldn't be doing all this for you, right? Oh, the freak. I guess you, you understand the mindset of Joe. He's only pretending to hate me because really he loves me. That's rather sweet. That's rather sweet, and he can't get over his feelings, and he has to overcompensate by saying really terrible things about me. And I'm actually quite happy that he says these terrible things on, posts his comments on my videos, because it's a sign of my martyrdom about, how much I'm prepared to suffer the abuse and insults from crazy people like Joe, to show how much I care about white people who, let's face it, have been rather disappointing. That it's like I've identified quite a few of them, who could be helping me, but they're just being, either treacherous or uncooperative, or just not up to the job of even discussing secular Koranism in a rational and reasonable way. But, I guess people can only do what they can do, and only want to do what they want to do, and I can't force them. I can nag them a bit, but, I just have to be patient with them and try the nice cop, nasty cop routine, and eventually they'll come round once they're assured that I really do care about them. What's your question? Is it a goat slain or a person slain to forgive sins? Evelyn for you asks. I do not see the distinctions between the religions, he says. Surely you've come across the concept of repentance. So if you repent, then, you are forgiven, particularly in the eyes of the Abrahamic God, who is supposed to know our hearts and minds. So as long as you are truly remorseful, then you would be forgiven, but obviously you'd be expected to show remorse and want to atone for it. I mean, Judaism is all about that, isn't it? They have this idea called shuva, which is about, it is about repentance, and it's a 4-stage process of recognizing that one has been wrong, ceasing the action that one regrets, declaring oneself to be remorseful, and then compensating, the person whom we have wronged. I mean, that's how they do it. And then they have, the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, every year. So they are reminded of these things. So they, on Yom Kippur, they have to, whether they really mean it or not, they have, to say to each other that, I'm sorry for anything that might have caused you distress. And that's what they do. I think it's a very good idea too. Yes, obviously, Judaism and Islam are purely monotheistic, and it is necessary that it be monotheistic, because it's just silly to think, you have a kind of mum and dad deity, so you can go to one if the other one doesn't give you what you want. No, you can't do that. There is a final authority. You can't play them off against each other. What do you mean? It's like decoding an Incredible Hulk comic book. Is there anything to decode in the Incredible Hulk? So we're not sure if Joe is a non-parent or an unmarried father. We don't know. I mean, he's obviously not a married father, because he would say if he were. He's probably a non-parent if he's not. Well, either or, really. But we know he has, probably a few issues with women. Yes, I think Joe has a few issues, and he's probably a little lonely and likes to come here to. He probably doesn't like women that much. So Joe thinks I'm a harmless nutter. Well, that's all right. I mean, I know people who say that I'm dangerous. So I suppose the truth is something in between. I mean, I think the way Felix Rex is treating me suggests that he thinks I'm something a little bit more than a harmless nutter. And this includes all the, other alt-right YouTubers who won't have me on their channel, even though I've been banging on their door. But I mean, I have to admit that my ideas are radical and revolutionary. I would be lying to myself if I said, "Oh, I'm just a harmless nutter." Really, I'm just like Thomas Barton Reese with my crazy conspiracy theories and my bad hair, which I won't. If only he would wear a hijab, eh? Yeah. Well, I mean, hijab's actually quite useful if you have bad hair. And women do have bad hair days. And actually, quite a lot of men do have bad hair. So maybe they should wear a hijab. Well, welcome to you're Jewish. And Jews have the purpose of being like litmus paper. They're supposed to get triggered about idolatry. You know, the kind of like a canary in a gold mine. No, I'm thinking of a song, sorry. In a coal mine. And it's like they're supposed to mind about idolatry, and that is their real purpose for humanity. So that they Gentiles are, ooh, that Jew's sort of a bit triggered about my idolatry. Why is he being like that? And then, maybe they'll say, look, Jew, why are you so triggered about idolatry? What harm has it done you? I mean, why are you being like that? And then that might trigger that might initiate a conversation between the Jew and the Gentile about why idolatry is such a terrible thing. I suppose the Jew could say, well, if we practice idolatry, then we wouldn't exist anymore. We would completely lose our identity. And it's possible that if Jews lost their identity before Islam was founded, then, well, mankind would have been deprived of the great religions of Christianity and Islam, right? Because without Judaism, without the Abrahamic God, well, I mean, look at it this way. Without Judaism, there would be no Jews. Without Jews, there would be no Jesus for Christians to worship. And without the terrible error of the abomination of the idolatry and blasphemy of Christianity, there would be no Quran to correct all these people who were far astray. So it's kind of fitting in now, the narrative, to explain the current predicament of the West. It's a nice, neat story, isn't it? You must admit. The narrative I have woven that you wouldn't really be able to deny. Because it cannot be falsified that, however terrible an abomination Christianity and idolatry is, it is there to impel Westerners into accepting Islam once they realize how much their civilization has declined since they stopped practicing marriage in the last 50 years, in the last half century. So it's quite impressive how marriage has kept the West together, even while they believed in the nonsense of the idolatry and blasphemy of Christianity. So, I mean, they were still able to kind of know that technically they were supposed to believe that Jesus was God, but they didn't really. And but as long as they practiced marriage, they were able to conquer the world until they stopped practicing marriage and then, totally disgraced themselves by, the craziness of their stupid leaders and picking a fight with the Russians and, well, basically getting both their eyes blackened. And there's more trouble to come, unless they correct themselves. And, we can be part of this story to get our government to correct themselves. If only Black Pigeon Speaks, aka Felix Rex, would allow me on his channel to explain what I've explained to you. I've been talking for 90 minutes now, my goodness. I'm just repeating myself, I know. The freak, I don't know why you say sensible things and then you revert to the idolatry of Christianity. I can't work you out. It's very sad. Evelyn, for you asked, do you think an idol is a statue? No, an idol has to be something that you worship and that you think represents something divine. So, obviously not every statue is worshipped, and I think it's nice to have statues because they're pretty, aren't they? And sometimes you have to reward a few, military leaders and, people who are dead, because people want to see what these, dead white males look like, what their faces look like. If we can't have a statue, we can have busts, right? G38 says you get scammed in religion. Well, only if you allow yourself to get scammed. I mean, of course, a lot of people will use superstition to make you part with your money. But if you already have a theocracy, then your theocracy would tax you, and then you don't have to give, anything else you want to give is, up to you in charity. So I would say that an Islamic rate of tax would be a 20% flat rate income tax called khums, and it says 1/5. And I think that's fair enough. So you get, and you just stick to that tax plan. So you budget for things properly. in your country. And I mean, what's wrong with that? And they always make sure that your spending does not exceed your income, and you will never allow your welfare state to, well, get out of control. And so you would have to basically reintroduce a humane form of slavery, because you can't really afford to pay people to stay at home watching porn and daytime TV. You actually have to make them work and, make the condition of being potless, well, shameful. So, and that's why you have to reintroduce slavery. And I have already a plan for slavery, of humane slavery, that is different to previous forms of slavery. I won't go into it now, but this would be one of the unique features of secular Koranism. I don't know what's happened to Saigon Green. He popped up briefly for a while, didn't he? Tubia says, Jews reject a cold, empty, unconscious, pointless universe that arose out of nothing. And quite right too, because it is the Abrahamic God that has changed life for the better for many people over the ages than anything else. Of course, it can't be quantified and I can't prove it, but imagine if we were all, well, pre-Abrahamic. It is not to say that people on their own cannot establish the rule of law and, wise and just laws. But the thing is, the people, it's like Hammurabi. He had some laws that were, well, obviously worked for a bit, and until his empire came and went. But what we need is something more powerful than us, or something supposedly more powerful than us that will outlast us. That is the source of our laws, because whether God really exists or not, theoretically, to avoid having to keep relearning the lessons of history and straying away from the institution of marriage, because we think we are special in our age and we can get away with it with the pill and all kinds of things. We should really, well, continue to respect the institution of marriage and arrange our lives accordingly to stop the destabilizing effects of becoming a matriarchy and then having to correct the situation with theocracy. I guess it's a divine version of saying, stay in your lane and, don't go all over the place. Observe lane discipline and, don't drive recklessly and end up a road casualty. How can a book not be an idol, Evelyn, for you asks? Well, it's not really idolizing a book if that book indeed contains the laws of God and you are following them correctly. I have myself said that the Hadith might become, well, some Muslims treat the Hadith as a form of conceptual idol. I know there will be controversy about, which scripture really contains God's laws, and, which guide is more in conformity with God's laws. Obviously, we will be arguing with each other about that. But I think the Quran is obviously the best available guide to mankind. And, as regards its interpretation, obviously I would recommend mine, but I don't expect my interpretation to, well, I don't expect to have complete control over its interpretation. After all, I am but a moral and fallible woman. But perhaps my recommendations will be considered persuasive. Oh, the free girls, as if I'm prepared to martyr myself. Well, I mean, to the extent that I am prepared to tolerate insults and abuse, because that would be, points of martyrdom. I mean, obviously, I don't want to suffer too much. After all, I have suffered, well, quite enough in my view already. But, to show conviction, I suppose I must be prepared to martyr myself in some way for my to promote secular Koranism. So, G38, do you think Jews are stupid? Because he says religion is a dummy, is for the dumbest people on the planet. But I don't think Jews are stupid, do you? Well, secular Koranism is quite original, I would argue. I am quite intellectually creative, as you may have noticed. That woman says most Jews are idolaters. I think we're all technically capable of idolatry, which is a thought crime. Because according to the Hadith, you can be guilty of hidden idolatry, even though as a Jew or a Muslim you appear to be praying correctly. And, if you, instead of praying to God, you are thinking of, doing something that God, if he exists, would disapprove of, then you are actually guilty of this hidden idolatry that I've just mentioned. What a silly question Joe asks. Is is man God's mistake? No, of course he must have intended to create humanity. In fact, the story is that he kept asking the angels if he should create humanity, and they said, no, you shouldn't. And I think he destroyed one lot, and then he created another lot, and then he asked them the same question, and anyway, he ignored them. And then I think the story is that Satan was the one who said, no, I will not bow to man, because God was basically saying, man is higher than angel, is higher in status than angels. And Satan resented that and refused to bow down to Adam or something of that nature. So we can talk about how, whether man is higher in status than an angel. The difference really is that humanity has been imbued with free will, but angels are basically automatons who just carry out God's orders. I know the story doesn't completely make sense, but you get the idea that man has been given free will, and for this reason we are higher in status to automatons. There you go. Yes, that woman says Jews are dabbling in Hinduism and Buddhism these days. I'm afraid it's not just Jews, right? I mean, I come from that kind of tradition, but obviously for Western man, it's completely wrong. And I do encourage secular Koranism in China and Singapore and Korea and Japan, and obviously I want it to be globally dominant, haha. But obviously it would accommodate, Hindus and Buddhists, because that is the whole idea of secular Koranism. It accommodates the other world religions of Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism, and Hinduism. So this is something to bear in mind. It is an imperial religion, and it's not going to force anyone to change their religion, which would be counterproductive and would, incite a lot of hatred and provoke a lot of violence. So, and there's no point, because truth stands clear from error. And if people want to persist in the error of worshipping Jesus as the co-equal of the God of Israel and Allah, then they must be allowed to do so. And I think eventually, in a few generations, that most people will give it up when they see what the mainstream is. So I suppose Jews want to, I think they go to India to have a bit of fun, and then the thing that people don't understand is that idolatry is a natural inclination. People are drawn to things because they don't really get ideas. I mean, most people are not intellectual, so when they see things, they take a materialistic view of it. They want to possess it. They want to look at it. They want to, enjoy the thoughts they get as they look at the thing that they want or are puzzled by. But really, it would be more efficient and effective if they just considered ideas and thought about them in their minds. But I do see that not everybody is the analytic intellectual that I am. And that is why people should trust me to do their thinking for them, particularly certain nationalists who are obviously uncomfortable with, even analysing ideas in an honest and reasonable way. No, I can't agree with you there. G38, humans are not gods. No, G38 says, we made God, we're actually greater than gods. That's interesting. This reminds me of what I once said, that about God being greater than his creation, who created him. If you want to think of God as a product of the human imagination, it doesn't really matter what, it's like we still have to follow the laws. So you can think whatever you want, that God is a creation of man, or the other way around. As long as you obey the laws, it's okay. You think whatever you like. That would be the case under secular Koranism. We can never make up our mind anyway about how God came to be created. But there is a verse in Hamlet that I think perfectly expresses its mystery. This conundrum, it's very chicken and egg, isn't it? I'm afraid my computer is a little slow. So it says, what a piece of work is man, says Hamlet. How noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action how like an angel, in apprehension how like a god, the beauty of the world, the paragon of animals, and yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Obviously, he was suffering from depression. And from these few sentences, you could ask yourselves, what is this quintessence of dust that we return to when we die? So, yes, the most profound truths are paradoxical. It could be that the Abrahamic God was just the imagination of a man called Abraham, or the Abrahamic God really does exist, and we can spend the rest of our lives wondering. So what do you mean, Joe? 2,000 years and no new God invented? Of course not, because The Abrahamic God is the most powerful deity conceivable. So you can't go beyond that. Joe says Greek gods are the best gods. Why? Because you like the stories, you like the Greek myths, but the Greek pantheon is no more because the ancient Greeks are no more, and the ancient Romans who culturally appropriated the Greek pantheon are no more. So this means that in some way, however engaging and dramatic you find the stories of the Olympians, you need to understand that ultimately, even when the ancient Greeks were in existence, they didn't really believe. They didn't really believe about, Zeus and Hera and Aphrodite and all the rest of it. They made good stories, but they didn't really believe all that happened. And for that reason, ancient Greece didn't survive because we know what stopped them. They just couldn't get on. They had a kind of cultural identity. They all spoke Greek, and yeah, they worship the same gods, but these gods did not allow them to become an empire. And because they exhausted themselves in war, Sparta and Athens, the Romans took over. So, and the Romans tried to keep things together, and they used they used Christianity, but I think if you have any powers of deduction, I think you would know that Constantine, if he had the option of Islam, would have used Islam instead. Because Islam is the religion that is fully grown and fully dressed and fully armed against its enemies, both internal and external, while Christianity is the religion with the inferior scripture as well as the terrible infringements against the commandments of the Abrahamic God, against idolatry and blasphemy. That woman says I must be nicer to Christians. It's like, I've seen Muslims who do it in a more gentle way. And they take hours, days, and it still doesn't work because, if that person wants to believe in God, if that person wants to remain Christian, then they will. Don't find some stupid excuse to reject Islam. And so, this is just my way of doing it. And I'm just saying, you have to explain why Christianity is not idolatry and blasphemy. And if you say that Christianity is not idolatry and blasphemy because Jesus is God, then how and why is Jesus God? And this just makes it really simple. And, if they're intellectually honest, they'll say, well, I can't prove to my own satisfaction that Jesus is God, therefore Islam must be right. Or, they'll just defy you anyway. They'll defy you because, the anti-Semites and Islamophobes, right? It depends on why they want to believe in Christianity. Ultimately, their reasons is key to being able to shift them away from it. And obviously it depends on how amenable they are to reason. And I won't be the only one to deal with them. And in any case, I'm not saying that it will be illegal to become Christian, to remain Christian. But I think my methods of undermining Christianity is very simple, and very effective, I think, if you're going to be logical about it. And as for Jews, I mean, I'm quite pleased with myself with my Nidakat arguments, and they have no answer because they're actually not prepared for it. What I say to Jews, that it's a capital offence. It's death by beheading for Jews if they are a citizen of a city that has gone astray. And by this is meant the city that has gone over to idolatry. And obviously, if Christianity is bottom of the heap as far as the Gentile religions are concerned as regards it being in conformity with the Noahide laws, then Christianity is the worst religion for Gentiles, and Jews who live and die as citizens of a Western nation is technically a nidaka, because Western nations are part of Christendom. And so, yeah, I mean, the anti-Semites can just sort of, maybe, be pleased, like, oh, all these Jews who thought they were going to heaven, and then they go to heaven, and God is there just saying, well, you'll have to be beheaded, and then you'll have to be resurrected to, be punished for, all the other sins. They could have been sodomites and breakers of the Sabbath, and been drunk and disobedient sons, and been adulterers. I mean, you can clock up quite a few death penalties in one Jewish lifetime, right? So, I mean, I don't know why Gentiles are so envious of these Jews because of their chosen status. It's like, well, they have a lot to answer to God for as God's chosen people. I mean, they're welcome to it. I don't envy them at all. And my point is that if they want to escape all these terrible punishments that are awaiting them, particularly Jews who are citizens of Western nations who are part of Christendom, then their only escape is to convert to Islam. So that's how I deal with Jews. I've told a few Jews too, and they kind of have to take it from me and smile. Because, it's like, okay, even these rabbis, they have no answer because it's not what they learn at rabbinical college. And you can almost understand why they don't want to talk about it, because they can't bear to think that all their ancestors who've been in Christendom for how many centuries, how many millennia, it's like, yeah, they all lived and died, and they had to be beheaded in the afterlife, right? Because the whole idea of these, okay, this is in the Talmud, I think, and so some Jew had to be beheaded for something, and the rabbi said, well, it is a blessing, really, because if you get your death penalty now, you don't have to deal with it when you actually die. Imagine, just sort of living a Jewish lifetime and then dying and then meeting God, and God saying, oh, sorry, but you'll have to be beheaded in heaven, in the afterlife, and then you can, we'll decide what to do with you once all the death penalties that you have incurred have been discharged. And I mean, the most rational conclusion to come from these terrible punishments in the Torah is really to nudge the Jews into converting to Islam, right? Because Jews have this thing called hukim. You see, I'm so I'm so brilliant, aren't I? I do have all the answers. Therefore, you should listen to me. Hukim. I remember this thing called hukim. So they're basically rules in Judaism that even rabbis don't know the reason for. It's like, we have to do it because we're Jewish. Don't ask me anymore. I can't work it out either. Right? It's stuff like the red heifer. So okay, this is under the Chabad website, and and the few questions like, why does Judaism make no sense? We might not understand, but it works. Yeah, it's sort of things like, you have to sacrifice a red heifer, and it's like, why red? Why that color? And it's like, nobody knows it. And it just says it. It just says it in the Torah, and we don't know, but we have to follow it. So I think I'm pretty good at explaining Judaism to Jews, But yeah, these rabbis, they have no answer to my, to the points I put to them, and they kind of hate it when I say, well, the only escape for Jews is conversion to Islam, because the whole point of the Torah is to point Jews and Gentiles to the Quran in our time, right? It's a nice and neat theory, isn't it? Gosh, I've been talking for over 2 hours now. I'm feeling a bit peckish. Jay Walker thinks he can tell us about idolatry. I don't know who Shane Warne is. So many comments in the chat, I can't even get past them. Dr. Mengele is here. Secular Islamic rule is not original. Where do they have secular Islamic rule? Well, thank you for Greek for quoting chapter 2, verse 256. I don't even remember that stream that woman is talking about. Did I say it a lot? Oh, I can't remember now. I think I might have been a bit annoyed. Endless comments. Can't even get to the end of them. Mostly posting nonsense. Oh, sometimes I like what Joe says. He says both the Bible and Quran should be given the Jefferson treatment and have all the stories cut out, leaving just the stuff like locking life, eating slavery, all this, and so on. Yes, you're right. You're right. It's wonderful to be understood. Yes, I invented Secular Koranism. So where else do they have something like that? Somebody stole my idea, did they? Okay, I finally got to the end of the chat. Right. I can go now. I can go and have something to eat. So thank you all for coming. And yes, it was quite a fun stream today. Enjoy the rest of your evening.